Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is a special chai and chat session on dealing with Islamophobia in our homes. And the reason why I thought it was important to deal with this subject is because there have been a lot of reaction, obviously, to the recent American election. It has impacted many people, not only in the US, but it is still impacting all around the world. When I talk to clients, when I'm speaking with young people, they have all dealt with this issue in some shape or form. So I think it's a good idea for us to talk as parents about what is, what we can do to prepare ourselves, what are some of the helpful responses, and what are some of the unhelpful responses. So let's first start with, what is the temptation and what, sometimes we do, which is which is not helpful. Sometimes what happens is that we react out of fear, and some of us are tempted to encourage ourselves and our children to downplay their Muslim identity, to not acknowledge the fact that they're Muslims, and this is one response that happens. Another response that can happen, which is also not very helpful, is that we start to hide out, in the sense that we start living small. It impacts our life. We are going out less. We are not doing the things that we would normally do. And again, this is really not a long-term solution. It is extremely damaging for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, at the end of the day. One of the other reactions that happens sometimes is that we tell our children and ourselves that if we had faith in God, we wouldn't be scared. Sometimes we hear these things, just have faith in Allah and just go out and you shouldn't be scared. And again, that's not a really helpful response, especially for our children. And the reason for that is because it really gives them a signal that we don't understand what they're going through. The reality of the matter is that some of us, when we are dealing with the outside world, when we go out to work, we're dealing with it ourselves. People of all ages are experiencing it, and the younger people are experiencing it disproportionately, for sure. So, when we're older, first of all, especially if you're not working anymore, if you're not working outside the home, we actually have a choice of where to go, where not to go. We tend to be isolated in our own little circles. We don't integrate too much with the community. And then, so we just expose less, right? But for the children, this is obviously not a realistic game plan, because they are either studying or working. They are out in the world, and they need to be. Even if they're going to Islamic schools, hopefully they are integrated within the society. And if their reality is that they are likely to encounter some form of bigotry. Obviously, not everyone does. It's a very fine line between becoming paranoid and having a realistic game plan. And the idea for today is certainly not to make ourselves paranoid. I think, one of the things, in fact, what has happened is that many of us are becoming paranoid. We're becoming extremely anxious. We are glued to the TV. We are reporting every incidence of Islamophobia that's happening. We are, in a panic mode. And this is an understandable reaction when something like this first happens. But however, we, now that, the dust has settled a little bit, in the sense that we're facing the reality of what is happening on the ground, number one. Number two, knowing that this is, likely to be there for a while. It's not something that is, once hatred is unleashed, as we know, it's extremely hard to put it back, right? But now that, we have we really do need to have an effective plan moving forward on how we can not only survive, but actually thrive, and see this as an opportunity to really grow and do some things which will actually strengthen ourselves, strengthen our children, our families, and ultimately our communities. And again, so the way I see it is that yes, it is a very stressful period in our lives, but also it is a call to action. And if we do take those actions, if we do take that opportunity seriously, we can actually grow from this and inshallah, become stronger. So again, just to repeat, it's not helpful in the long term to either give up our Muslim identity, to stop speaking up, to stop wearing hijab, or to hide out, not go out, or also to tell ourselves that, everything will be fine as long as we have faith in God. Yes, definitely faith in God is an extremely important part of the mix, but we still have to deal with the reality on the ground, and we have to actually prepare ourselves. So what are some of the things? So, the three-part game plan that I would suggest is, maybe it's not even three-part. Obviously, I'm doing this kind of as an informal question and answer. Inshallah, I will write something with more resources, so that there will be links, and that will be posted inshallah on the website and on the Facebook as well. But basically, once we've dealt with the reality on the ground, once we've accepted that this is what we're dealing with, after that, it's really no point railing against what's reality. The sooner we accept that this is what is happening, the sooner we can actually start preparing and move on. So the second part is obviously to prepare, to have a plan of action, and we will talk about what that looks like. Then obviously to pray, because without that, we are nowhere. So once we've prepared, definitely that's the time to have tawakkul. That's the time to pray, and also not to stop either ourselves or our children in engaging with the world. This is a very, very important point. A lot of young people are suggesting that their lives have become, their lives are very difficult outside for what's happening, but also at home, because the parents are in panic mode, right? And obviously the less prepared we are, the more likely we are to panic. So, the idea is that once we have some idea of what to do, we have some sort of safety plan in place, then we can really encourage the children to live their lives as normally as possible. This is extremely important. So, what can we do as a family? First of all, we need to acknowledge the risk. So, the idea that, if we had faith in Allah, we would not be scared. This is not a realistic thing to tell them. And if we give our children this message that just have faith in Allah and everything will be fine, it really disconnects us from what their reality is. And many people, they write and they speak about the fact that the parents at home are really not in tune with what is happening, either in their school, and again, as parents, we sometimes think that if we engage in difficult conversations with our children, it is somehow encouraging them to do a certain thing or to go a certain way, right? And that's actually not. All research suggests that if we have difficult conversations at home, if we even acknowledge children's fears, if we acknowledge that they may really have significant concerns about religion, that's a whole very, very important topic, because many of our children are actually going through a crisis of faith. And parents are mostly unaware of it. They are unaware of it till something significant happens, and that they're confronted with it. But if we allow our children to voice what is happening in their heads without overly reacting, it will greatly help us in being able to at least have a conversation with them, guide them in some sense, right? So, have a family conversation, and what that conversation looks like is to, first of all, we can express our own concerns, that I'm concerned that you're going out and you are alone, that you may encounter some of this, and my concern is that you won't know what to do, or it will greatly impact you, right? Also then really listen to what they are going through. If we start a family conversation, really we should be speaking much less than we are listening. And listening, looks like not, every time something comes out of their mouth, we don't need to fix it immediately. We don't need to, we just need to hear them out. Young children are extremely, I'm just always so impressed at how in tune with they are, what they need to do, how aware they are that they need to take safety measurements. And what happens is that we don't know what they're thinking, right? And if we don't know, we are much more concerned about their safety because we don't know that they actually already have a plan. Obviously, when all of this is happening, I spoke to my daughter to see, and by the way, both my girls have experienced Islamophobia, unfortunately. Not violence, but certainly racial slurs, and so it is something that we have a family have dealt with ourselves. And before that, I used to be in a state of denial myself, I must admit, that it only happened to if you weren't confident, if you gave off the vibe of being vulnerable, and we are not like that, and yet they did encounter it. So the reality is that all of us are at risk, right? I was actually surprised at how much she had thought through her, what she would do, how she was protecting herself, and so obviously this gives me a lot more confidence that that she is thinking things through. Another thing I would suggest is to really control the amount of media that we are consuming. And why am I saying that? Because it's what's happening in many homes is that all we are doing is we are first of all looking at what's happening. We are listening to the news. We are feeding the frenzy of anxiety all the time. The minute, there's so many reports of horrific things happening. So we get these reports, we forward them, we are really literally feeding the frenzy. So what are we to do, given that we also need to be aware? It's not a helpful strategy also to switch off completely and not know what's going on, right? What I'm suggesting is that we really be mindful of how much we're consuming of this information, and also before forwarding it or before passing it along, really consider, is it going to help somebody? If it is one more example of how things are really horrific, then I read something recently that when we read a piece of news, it actually causes significant mental and emotional distress unless it is combined with an action plan. Okay, and part of the reason for doing this is again to give some power back to ourselves, to recognize that yes, things are very bad, but we can actually do something about it. And once we take action, it's a huge difference in our mental and emotional well-being. Okay, so again, when we're talking about media, be mindful, don't be that's all you do. So and it's very tempting because again, I do it myself. If something is horrific is happening, we tend to post it on Facebook, we WhatsApp it, we do all of these things. And recently, and again, one of my kids pointed it out, that it's not helpful. It's causing a lot more fear. So unless you have a game plan on what we can do instead, don't do it. And that's really good advice. And very often actually our children do give us very good advice if we listen to them, if we are open to the fact that they really think about the world a little bit differently than we do. They do have a lot to teach us. Another point that is helpful is to encourage our kids to find community. Now, what do I mean by this? Many times we think that they're already part of our community, our mosque, our center, our circle of friends. And what many young people report is actually that this is not their community. Why? Because they feel judged. They feel that they're not accepted, especially if they question or if they are a little bit different in any way, right? And it's a difficult thing for us parents to recognize that, if it's not that they're rejecting it, but if they are finding community which may not look like our community, right? It may not even be Muslim. But this is a space that all of us need. We all need a place where we can be accepted, not judged, and we can be ourselves. And, again, friendship and all of that is a huge conversation. But to recognize that, especially in times like this, they need allies and they need a community. And we should encourage it in a sense rather than, try to keep them away from it. And obviously, if their community is giving us concern, then let's have a conversation about them, not just telling them that, what they're doing is wrong or whatever, but really understanding what they are getting from it that is valuable. And once they know that we get, that this is important to them and they're actually getting something of value, they are much more likely to be open to our concerns and our guidance as well. It is also important for them and for us to have allies. So one thing is only sticking with our community, but reality is that yes, there are a few people who are scary, but generally, we should encourage a positive outlook towards people. So just as some Muslims spoil the name of the great, big, vast Muslim Ummah, similarly, a few people who are Islamophobic tend to so everyone, we lump everyone in the same category, right? So what people are reporting and what's the reality on the ground is that for every one person who's Islamophobic, many other people are actually going out of their way to show support. And this is something that we need to encourage for ourselves as well as for our children. And again, this is the message of hope, right? That yes, there are certain people who are like that, but not everyone is. And whether it's in your school community or your work community, you need to find an ally. You need to find someone who you can turn to if things get difficult or dangerous. And speaking about young children, for example, in school, and we can talk a little bit maybe about what the differences are between dealing with younger kids and older kids. It's a good idea for us to have some idea of what their class or what their school community looks like, right? And so if you're talking about allies, it may not be their class teacher, because again, reality is that people in power are not always allies, right? It could be somebody else. So when we are involved in the school, when we do even if it's just simply going to parents teachers meetings or something like that, we may have some idea of who would be more sympathetic, who would be a good person to turn to. And it's a good idea to have that conversation with your child, that if something were to happen at school, here are a few people that you could turn to. We also need to advocate for safety and for self-defense. I think all women should probably get self-defense training. Muslim women today, it is almost a requirement that we should get self-defense training, our children, right? And how to get that? A lot of schools are providing it. If it's not your schools, I would strongly recommend that you advocate in your community centers, in your mosques, that they should provide this for community members. And if that's not happening, certainly groups of mothers can get together to make it more cost effective. How to find it? Obviously, try to Google it. It's if you look at rape crisis centers or women's safety, if you Google these kinds of things, you will get some idea. Obviously, there are many videos available for free online. I just saw one yesterday about, it was specifically about people pulling off the hijab from the back, and this is again something which is happening a lot. So it is a good idea. Most of our kids, inshallah, will not encounter it. But when they are prepared, when they know what to do, it really eases up the anxiety. It eases up the anxiety for themselves as for us. So again, this video actually showed a man trying to pull off the hijab of I think it was about a 10 or 11-year-old girl, and how to break his grip and what to do. So again, really valuable thing. Even if it's not Islamophobia, any woman who is going out on her own in the night, a few things that we can do to make sure that our girls are safe is obviously to really have a conversation about keeping their phones charged. That's at the very minimum. Many of us complain that we can never get in touch with our children because their phones are never charged, right? And what happens is that we're only having this conversation, me included, when we're trying to get in touch with them, their phone is not charged. So we get upset, they're upset, and it never goes anywhere. If we actually have a conversation which is separate from the incident, it's much more likely to work. So, get them a mobile charger, one of those small power chargers if that's what it takes, but their phone should be charged at all times. There are many apps out right now for safety, and when I do put this in writing, inshallah, I will note down those apps. You can also look them up, which actually time the person, and if they're not home in time or whatever, they will inform certain people. Many a times children are resistant, especially if they're young adults, if they're living on their own, if they're working, they are quite resistant to having telling their parents every minute where they are. And again, it's a tough battle but as long as they have a group of people that they are communicating with, so it could be friends, it could be other family members, just a WhatsApp, I'm home, I'm going here, I'm coming back. All of us have different levels of involvement in our children's lives day to day, and some of us are extremely involved, so we demand that we know where our children are at all times, even if they're young adults, and that's probably not that healthy. It's much more our anxiety than a need for them. But as long as they recognize the principle that this is something which is a serious concern today, and the more they inform us of what their own safety plans are, the more likely we are to be comfortable with it. Okay. So phone charge where you are, obviously to go out in groups, to, if something is happening, to report it. Do not let it go. It's a good idea to look up our rights, to look up racial harassment, hate crimes, all of this on the internet. There's very good resources available, government websites, no matter where in the world you are. And they always have a plan. They tell you what to do, who to call, and it's a really good idea to sit and discuss this as a family so that everyone is on the same page. And obviously, following on from that is to know your rights. So, what is your right? What is, what should you do and what can you do? It is also a good idea to tell our children that if somebody, for example, is just making a racial slur, what can they do? The first thing is obviously to be safe. So if they're in a position where they're feeling threatened, it is not a good idea to speak up. They should go, they should remove themselves as much as they can, find a group, find allies, talk loudly, do all of these things because again, at the end of the day, people who do these things are like bullies. It's the same kind of so all the things that we tell our children to deal with bullying, it's the same, it's exactly the same thing to deal with perpetrators of hate crimes, for example, right? Obviously we know that people who are doing these things, they always get scared when somebody else speaks up, or when the person is not threatened, right? And again, if we are preparing our children, it's much more likely that they will take it, they will be able to handle it. So if we, what does training look like? Actually practice with them, that if somebody tells you this, what will happen. When we role play, it's a hugely beneficial thing. Why? Because it gives us some sort of peace, that they know what they're doing. It also gets the mind ready. So if they if something happens, they already have practiced it in their mind, so in a sense it comes naturally. Okay, so it's actually very, very useful. And again, not looking scared. So all of us should really train our children, especially our girls, to walk with authority. And this is, it comes, it's a bit of a challenge for most of us, because many of our communities really encourage women to be soft and gentle, and not not be so visible, right? But when we are going out in the world and it is a matter of our safety, we do need to claim our space. And it does take some training. So a simple thing, what I very often do with clients is actually what is called power poses. Power poses is simply standing in authoritative position, breathing confidently, imagining that your feet are like roots of a tree. So it only takes a few seconds, but it gives a huge boost to confidence, and all of us can try this, right? So simply stand on the ground with your feet slightly apart. Breathe, just ground yourself. Imagine that your feet are growing roots into the ground, and just bring to mind the feeling of strength, of stability, of confidence. And just be with that feeling for a few moments. It's a very simple exercise. It is hugely powerful. And by the way, it works in many different situations. If you're going somewhere where it's going to cause you stress, if you are speaking in public, it's a very good grounding exercise. So once we get used to doing that, actually teach them to walk with what looks like confidence. My daughter tells me that I have this angry face on when I'm in public, giving the message that no one mess with me. And it's I'm not thrilled about it, but again, this is something that that she needs to do for her safety, and I really respect that. Obviously, many of our girls are reporting that they make sure, like especially in trains and subways and buses, this is a huge problem. So not to stand in a place where it is going to make you vulnerable. Stand in a place where there are other people, that you are aware of your surroundings. It's a very good idea it's generally a very good idea, but now more than ever, it's a very good idea for us to be aware of our surroundings, of where we are and what that looks like. Media. So obviously, when we are walking and we have headphones in our ears, and there might be whatever blasting on the phone, it is extremely difficult to be aware of our surroundings. And this is something that we also need to have a conversation about, that especially when we are in a crowded place, we don't know what the environment is like. It's actually like cutting off one of our senses. And we know how scary it is if somebody comes up upon us when we haven't hurt them. It is literally taking us unawares. So this is again something that we need to discuss with them, that and maybe even role play. Have them put on their phones and just practice. Coming at them from behind to really give the message that this is the reality of what is happening. Okay. So I think we've spoken about most of the things. So up to now we've been talking about physical safety, right? But we also do need to deal with emotional and mental well-being. And what that means is that, given what is happening, many of our children are really struggling. They're struggling emotionally, they're struggling mentally, and they're struggling spiritually. Okay. It is, if they're in a Muslim environment, in a sense it's easier because everyone is going through the same thing. But if they're in a non-Muslim environment, many of them are being pressured to always be explaining, right? And it is a message that they need to hear, that it is too much to expect anyone to speak for such a large population of the world, okay? So to ease up on themselves a little bit. Also to recognize that there are some people who are looking for answers, and there are others who are actually just out to make them wrong. And this is very good advice for us as well, right? And if somebody is genuinely looking for answers, then it's good to engage with them. But the people who are really out to make them wrong or to prove a point, really, and that's what the Quran teaches us, right? That when the Jahilun are addressing us, the best thing is to say qawlu salama, to not engage, to withdraw from the situation as much as you can. So many times people will send me these long email exchanges or WhatsApp exchanges about a situation like this and what can we do. And the idea is you really can't do anything. It is not your job to convince anyone of anything. The best thing we can do is to live our truth and to support each other, to do good in the world, and then it's really up to them to seek guidance, and it is up to Allah to guide them. Definitely the people who are, genuinely seeking, we should engage with them, right? And it takes a while to begin to know the difference. So at least to give that message to our children. Also, many a times they are actually conflicted because they think somehow we deserve this because of what people are doing, because of what people who call themselves Muslim are doing. And it's a very important conversation to have at home. If we're not having that conversation at home, I promise you it doesn't mean that your children are not thinking about it, right? So, things of faith, things of what's happening in the world, we really do need to have these conversations at home, because very often children are feeling that that there's a disconnect, that they don't feel understood at home, that they're not feeling understood anywhere actually, because what is happening outside is is risky, and at home there's lack of understanding. So at least at home we can, first of all, if they're going through some stuff, believe them. Do not try to talk them out of it. This is, these are serious things. If they are confiding in us, we need to take that as a gift, as a trust, and deal with it accordingly. And I think lastly, I would like to point out that we do need to live large. Let's not use this as an excuse to retreat into the world, to say this is not a time to be Muslim, this is not a time to be proud of our identity, this is a time to retreat. It's actually not a time to retreat. It's not going to solve anything. If anything, it's a call to us for action, to live our truth, to make connections, to build bridges, and then to live life as normally as we can. Once we're prepared, then let's go for it. Let's not sit back. And is there a risk in that? Absolutely, there is. And just as there's a risk in not doing that, and I do believe that the risk in changing our lives beyond recognition is much greater. So I hope this helps, and I would love to get your feedback. I would, inshallah, we can certainly continue this conversation, at some other point. And please feel free to share it, and do let me know if there were questions that were not answered, some questions that you may have that I didn't even think of. And inshallah we will meet again. Thank you so much, and Assalamu alaikum.